So back in 2016, Israel was having a problem with unwanted African migrants. Basically, Africans had been infiltrating, which is the word that the Israelis use to describe illegal immigrants, into the country, and the Israelis at the time were paying them $3,500 in order to go home. And often they would be not even sending them home, they'd be sending them to other countries, such as in the case of this article to Uganda, even though these migrants had come from Sudan. Why it's Uganda's problem is anyone's guess, but I guess they were just trying to get them wherever they would go, and they were apparently being people smuggled into this country. Fast forward 2 years, and Israel still has a problem with around 40,000 African migrants who are in the country but refuse to leave. So they've told them that you're going to leave or face imprisonment. And Israel is still giving the same amount of money for them to leave as well as an incentive. The migrants, who are from Sudan and Eritrea, have said that they would rather go to jail than being forced to leave Israel, which is definitely the opinion of at least 3 of them, according to The Guardian, which is why they get to have the title African Migrants Being Forced from Israel Say It's Better to Go to Jail. Yes, it is multiple migrants who have said this, but how representative of the overall population of migrants it is, well, yet to be determined. But thousands of them have been protesting that Israel is planning to deport them and they do not want to go. Demonstrators carrying signs saying "We are all humans" and "Refugees and residents refuse to be enemies" marched through the streets of South Tel Aviv, where a large migrant community lives. So, well, okay, yes, you are all humans, but you're not Israeli humans, and you illegally entered a country which is a discrete entity that has specific defined borders, specific rules within it, and applies to specific people who happen to live in that geographical territory. You are not those humans, you're a different kind of humans who come from a country that I guess sucks. And I'm sorry that your country sucks, but there's no reason why these humans have to have you forced upon them, especially when you entered into their country illegally, purely because you think it would be a more beneficial arrangement for you. That's not an acceptable thing to do, in my opinion, even if your country sucks. Surely the onus is on you to do something to improve the state of your country, which is incidentally the reason I haven't moved to America. I happen to want to stay in my country and improve it. Admittedly, I'm in a much more privileged position when it comes to this. I don't live in Sudan. But at the end of the day, if we're going to be brutally honest about this, who makes a country what it is? The answer, the people living in the country. Ethiopian Jews are also threatening a mass hunger strike over the Israeli immigration budget cuts. Basically, they're annoyed that the Israelis aren't going to allow them to just mass immigrate to Israel, despite being Jewish, where they already have relatives and friends and family and whatnot there. I actually don't know why Israel isn't letting them in. I mean, they are Jewish, surely they should have preferential treatment. Interesting question, isn't it? But don't worry, Netanyahu found a solution. His solution was to resettle the African migrants somewhere else, somewhere they might like to be. Netanyahu's idea was to resettle them in Europe and Canada, the countries dumb enough to just take random illegal immigrants into Israel. That was, of course, until there was a massive outcry of people living in Europe and Africa already, saying we don't want your illegal immigrants, where Israel was forced to backtrack and scrap these plans, because to a rational person this is fucking lunacy. We're not just a dumping ground for the world's illegal immigrants, for the love of God. But you might be thinking, well, where would they get such a ridiculous idea? Why would Netanyahu just be like, well, just send them to Europe? The answer is, of course, we gave him that fucking idea. For example, David Miliband here today this was published, calling for leadership on refugee resettlement in the EU. The head of the International Rescue Committee says the EU should increase its intake of refugees to 108,000 per year. How about you do that, David? How about you open up your doors, take some refugees into your fucking house, and see how you like having to live cheek to jowl with them? David Miliband has called on the European Union to bring 500,000 refugees into Europe over the next 5 years, which would mean providing homes for almost 10% of the world's most vulnerable refugees each year. Look, I'm really fucking sorry that these people are refugees. I genuinely am. It's genuinely sad. And if they want some kind of intervention, if they want money, then I'm happy to say, okay, fine. Let's send them some aid. Let's send them military assistance if that's what they need. We can do things to help. Taking them in en masse is not the solution. We cannot house the third world. It is a stupid thing to suggest. It's never going to work, and it's just going to cause increasing problems here, and it's going to bleed us of money. At least if we're giving them money, we can demand accountability, we can set limits. When they're here, then we're going to have to pay God knows how much. It's a ridiculous thing to suggest. And I say this because I have to say this. It's not that I wouldn't want to help these people, it's that our resources are not limitless. Our working class have to deal with the social friction that this produces. Our people have problems, and you would be adding to them from your position of privilege where none of the problems would affect you. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees estimates there are 22.5 million refugees worldwide. And I'm sure that David Miliband is just like, well, he's Labour, of course. He's like, well, just bring them all in. Why not? We can afford this. In 2017, 65,000 refugees were resettled worldwide, a third of the number resettled the previous year, 189,000. The EU provided resettlement places for 23,000 of these. Europe has enough problems with its own refugee crisis, with 1.9% of them eligible for resettlement. Miliband said that Europe had been playing catch-up with the refugee crisis, not Europe's fault, not Europe's problem, but Europe is going to play catch-up anyway, as it dealt with large numbers of people arriving and claiming asylum over the past few years, thanks Merkel, and now had the opportunity to become a proactive player on this issue. Europe needs to recognise that this refugee crisis around the world is not going away, and Europe needs to have a proactive policy which includes the options of refugee settlement for a portion of the most vulnerable who are identified as qualifying for refugee settlement. Really, David, because it sounds like what you're saying to me is reform the empire. I'm sorry that their countries suck. I'm sorry that the people ruling these countries make them suck. I am sorry that there are jihadi war bands travelling around Africa and the Middle East killing people and causing a whole manner of problems. But these are not our fault. We are not making the jihadis. The jihadis, unfortunately, are made through means outside of our control. The warlords in Africa are beyond our control. Miliband said the need for Europe to provide world leadership had increased after the Trump administration announced last year it would slash US resettlement targets from 110,000 places to a maximum of 45,000 places. The US has traditionally taken the most refugees through resettlement programs of any country. Honestly, we should follow suit. And the European Parliament has called for the same thing, bringing in 230,000 refugees over 2 years. Have they not noticed how politically unpopular bringing in hundreds and thousands of refugees is? And when you say refugees, we're just going to take your fucking word for it, aren't we? I mean, most of the people who were involved in the migrant crisis, who came to Europe because Angela Merkel said, yes, everyone can come and have some German money, weren't refugees. Most of them were economic migrants, who we could otherwise term as opportunists, looking for some easy German money. And naturally, people are worried that there's going to be a bit of pushback from, say, the more nationalistic Eastern European nations, Czech Republic, Hungary and Poland being the ones listed in this article, and I do not fucking blame them. They actually have the right idea here. What they want to do is protect their nation and borders. Well, why? To protect the people living within them. Well, that sounds like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I mean, that is the job of those governments, to protect their citizens, to maintain their life, liberty and property, is that not? But instead, the kind of internationalist, globalist, progressive class of people who somehow found themselves in control of our nations have decided that for their own moral satisfaction, it would be better for the poorer people in our countries to suffer because some other people are suffering elsewhere. It's an idiot's proposal. It's absolute lunacy, borne by people who have no idea of the price of these things. So it was suggested that Britain might take in 15,000 refugees a year, up from the 7,000 odd resettled in 2017. But Miliband said that given the wealth of European countries, these numbers were possible. It's doubling from a very low number to another very low number. In Britain, the number of refugees coming in each year is the equivalent of 6 per parliamentary constituency. Yeah, okay, but that's not where it ends, is it, David? I mean, you're literally advocating we take in more, and more, and more. Where does it fucking end, David? The answer is it doesn't. Because there will always be someone you go, oh, I feel bad for that person. Come on, let's just take more and more and more. And yet again, I will not be paying the price for this. This will be someone else's burden to bear, but I'm going to feel like I'm making a difference. That's what you're fucking doing, David. And look at this reasoning. No one's going to tell me that my former constituency of South Shields is going to be overwhelmed by 6 refugees. Well, okay, well, let's assume these refugees commit no crimes. How many is it next year, David? And the year after? And the year after? And the year after? No. We should be taking none of these refugees because we didn't cause these problems and we are not responsible for solving them. But we can do, say, charity, we can go and help out, we can do things, but we're not taking them in just for the fucking sake of it. It's a matter for standing up for the values of the best of the West. What, open borders? That's not one of my values. I'm Western, that's not one of my values. Now what? Oh, it's the best of the West. Oh, right, okay, so what you're saying, you've cherry-picked the things you like about the West and think, well, it's a Western value to be a universalist, and therefore, nations shouldn't exist. That is a lunatic's perspective, David. That is, you were just choosing the one or two things you like and saying, well, this applies to everything now. No, it doesn't. Okay, it just doesn't. Especially in these countries, these values aren't even held as a value. These things don't bloody apply. You want to apply our morality to a bunch of people who don't support our morality by saying, let's just bring them all in. It's rather easy to see where the conflict is going to come there, isn't it? It's really easy to see why this is going to be really a problem for the people on the ground, the people you don't give a fuck about, because you're looking at this through the eyes of a systemic planner. You think, well, I can just arrange things. I mean, look, I'm looking at the total amount of wealth and thinking, well, that's fine. We've got loads of that. We can definitely afford a few thousand more migrants. Why the fuck not? Because it's not you that has the problem. I know I keep coming back to this, but this is the entire problem I have with the kind of social planning mentality that so many of these people have. They just don't consider the people on the ground and what's best for them. They consider what's best for people in other countries, which is not their responsibility, and how that will make them feel like good people. That's what this is all about. Get fucked, Miliband.